All right, you guys, welcome back to the channel once more. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for subscribing and, sharing across the platform. But anyway, the common complaint or the common comment is California was always too expensive. It was always more expensive to live in California than other states. However, people aren't comparing the job salaries to the cost of living. So you think it's cheaper to live in neighboring states like Arizona or Nevada, but it's like, can you find a high paying job like what you had in California? Yes, so maybe so, right? But due to the fact that remote work is more common now, how long will that last? And usually when you move out of California to another state, your pay is usually cut if you get to keep working at that same employer remotely. But let's go ahead and tune in and see how much you really need just to survive in California.
How expensive it is to just function here in California.
And it turns out it's expensive, but let's back into that. First of all, costs of living and incomes differ from state to state. So obviously, living in one place doesn't have the same cost as living in another place. So there's a financial app called MoneyLion that crunched the numbers and came up with a study that determined what the different costs are in different states and how much you need to be able to make to cover your nut. One takeaway from that study is that families in half the country, 25 states, need to earn about $30 an hour or roughly $53,000 a year after taxes to make ends meet. Another takeaway is that some states, including the one you are soaking in right now, can be very, very expensive.
Yeah, so basically now the average person, even a couple, they need a few incomes of their own and not just, both, couple work each one job. No, they have to work 2 or 3 jobs each. So even if you're making over $100,000 a year, after deductions, you're probably in the 70,000 range. So it's like, okay, does your income match the cost of living? Probably not, because most people can't afford to live on their own with just one income.
Get by in California, according to MoneyLion, you need to be making about $46 an hour or more than $79,000 a year to cover just the necessities such as housing, groceries, utilities, and health care. In fact, two states, and just 2 states alone, according to MoneyLion, are more expensive than California. They would be Massachusetts, where you need to be pulling down about $90,000 a year if you want to make your ends meet, or Hawaii, where you...
Do you hear that? So that means it's not just California that's expensive. We all know why Hawaii is expensive. It's in the middle of the ocean. And all they produce there, far as pineapple, what else? Everything is imported in Hawaii. That's why you're paying $10 for a gallon of milk. Expensive eggs. Produce is expensive there because most of it isn't grown there. That's why it's cheaper in California. But far as groceries in general in these other states, Massachusetts, the groceries are most likely more expensive there because most of that produce is coming from across the states. So that's one thing you have to factor in too. They didn't factor in how much the food cost differences. Food is cheaper in California, but look how expensive rent and everything is. And it's the same problem living in Massachusetts. Who wants us to live in Massachusetts other than living in Boston?
You have to pull down about $111,000 to make ends meet. But how does this jibe with what we actually know about how much people really do make? Well, that's another thing. A separate report from the job site ZipRecruiter says that the average hourly wage in California is $33.50, which is well below what that other study says you need to be making. And so by that math, the necessities in California...
So the average hourly wage is 31, but you need about 46. So yeah, that's a lot of difference, right? The problem is most jobs don't even pay $30 an hour. And that includes education or not. A lot of people with these college degrees can't even get those type of jobs. And are these jobs secure? As soon as they hire you for these positions, how much longer do you have before they do cutbacks? So you wasted all this time going to school, getting this college degree, and you're in debt. You owe probably $80,000 to tuition. And you get these low paying jobs and you're still struggling. You could barely pay the rent. and everything else. So it's like you can't even have a car note no more. That's why the new flex is to not have a car note. But then the people that do have car notes, they're living with family or they have their own family.
Would bankrupt most families. But since that's obviously not the case, what do we know is probably happening? What we know is a lot of families are getting by on not just one job, but 2 jobs or 3 jobs to make ends meet. Moreover, many families just have to live farther and farther away from their work just to be able to afford accommodations. And that's a very challenging place to be.
Especially if you work in education. Most educators, especially the ones that work in public school systems, let's say you live in, let's say you work in a coastal city, a large coastal city like Los Angeles or California or even New York. Most of the people that work in those cities, they don't live close by in the area. They probably live further out in the valleys, in the suburbs. But then it's even getting expensive there too.
What can you do about it? Well, aside from the 2, 3, or 4 jobs, you could move to the state that the Money Lion says is the cheapest, and that would be Mississippi, where you only need to be making about $45,000 a year.
Until everybody moves to Mississippi and the cost of living goes up, pricing out all the people that reside there since the day one of their life. So that's the same thing that happened to Vegas. Everybody started flocking to Vegas, Sacramento, and it's gotten quite expensive over the last 10 or 15 years from everybody doing that. So that'll be a problem too. It's the cheapest state to live there, but the problem is if you're getting paid minimum wage, it's still not enough to even live in country ass Mississippi. What is there to do in Mississippi as far as work? There's not a lot of high paying jobs to work there in general. I mean, what are you gonna do? You're gonna be a sheriff? You're gonna work in a warehouse? Like, what's the deal? There's not really a lot of jobs in Mississippi. You have whole towns that are put on welfare because there is no jobs or Section 8, whatever. But you get what I'm saying.
To make your nut.
Oh, that was my question, because there has been somewhat of a Cal exit. People are leaving. Where are they going? And is it based on this Money Lion study?
Not at all.
All right.
And they're mostly going to Florida, it turns out, and they have their own issues there. But no, if you want to be really getting by and making all that on a lower income, you'll probably want to look at some of the southern states, according to this study. But then again, you're not going to have the quality of life that California offers.
How expensive?
And that's the problem. When you move out of California, you feel that deterioration of life. You're not going to have the same quality of life. Life is different outside of California. And a lot of people realize that too late when they make the move and it's too expensive for them to go back. This is Cali Vale. I'll catch you in the next one. Goodbye.